This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Tuesday, May 25th. Welcome to Africa 54. We continue to work remotely because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but what hasn't changed is our commitment to bringing you the latest and most important news from the African continent and around the world. This is today's Africa 54. Repeated tremors shook the Congolese city of Goma on Monday, unnerving families still reeling from a volcano eruption at the weekend that destroyed nearby villages, displaced thousands, and killed at least 32 people. The victims of the volcano have been sifting through the charred remains of their homes, with some questioning why they were not given more of a warning. Soraya Ali of Reuters has more.
As lava from Congo's Mount Nyiragongo approached her home, Ernestine Kabu tried to get her sick husband to safety, but he was too unwell to leave.
I said to myself, I can't go alone. We've been married for the best and for the worst. I went back to at least try to get him out, but couldn't. I ran away and he got burned inside. I don't know what to do. I curse this day.
After a volcanic eruption on Saturday evening, residents of the Ouane district of DRC's eastern city Goma have been picking through the mangled remains of their homes and questioning why they weren't given more warning. Lava has left a smoking trail of destruction half a mile wide, burying hundreds of houses and stopping just short of Goma's city limits. At least 15 have died, according to authorities, a figure that is likely to rise. And authorities have urged caution. Shops briefly reopened in Goma on Monday, but many closed again as waves of earth tremors rocked the city. Experts say those quakes were likely caused by tectonic plates realigning and that the risk of a second eruption was small. Mount Nyiragongo is monitored by the Observatoire Volcanologique de Goma, or OVG. Humanitarian worker Lacey Kabasale questioned why the OVG hadn't been able to give residents more of a warning. Before the eruption, experts had warned volcanic activity in recent years mirrored that of preceding eruptions in 1977 and 2002. But volcanologists at the OVG have struggled to make basic checks since the World Bank cut funding amid embezzlement allegations. Speaking on radio on Sunday, the OVG's chief scientific director, Celestine Kasereka Mahinda, said the observatory had not been able to carry out comprehensive checks between October 2020 and April because of a lack of internet connection. Internet was restored in April thanks to funding from a US partner, he said, but by that stage, too much time had been lost.
Soraya Ali of Reuters with that report. In West Africa, Mali plunged into crisis after the military detained the president, prime minister and defense minister on Monday in what international bodies called an attempted coup. President Bah Ndaw, Prime Minister Moctar, Ouane, and Defense Minister Souleymane Doucoure were all taken to a military base in Kati outside the capital Bamako hours after two members of the military lost their positions in a government reshuffle, according to diplomatic and government sources. Their detentions followed the military ouster in August of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita. The development could exacerbate instability in the West African country, where violent Islamist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State control large areas of the desert north. A delegation from the top regional decision-making body, ECOWAS, will be in Bamako on Tuesday to help resolve the attempted coup. According to a joint statement by ECOWAS, the UN, African Union, European Union, and several European countries, escalating insecurity and communal violence in Nigeria appears to be strengthening separatist movements across the country. Among those movements is the indigenous people of Biafra, a group that advocates an independent state in a part of Nigeria that tried to break away more than 50 years ago. Timothy Obiezu reports from Abuja.
Former Biafran fighter Ide Obasi says he has renewed hope for an independent Biafra. In the late 1960s, he fought for the region's independence in the Biafran War.
But that time we used to say 2 weeks, no food. Only thing where they will give you, you will carry a kit, come out with your water bottle, they full of mogogoro. You go there to fight. If you die, no concern anybody.
Obasi was only 20 years old in 1967 when the Civil War started, and he was immediately recruited. He says many of his friends were killed fighting the Nigerian state, but he managed to survive the 3-year war that ended in 1970 with the defeat of the Biafran movement. While Obasi still supports secession, he says fighting must be avoided.
Don't fight another war, because children will finish. If they can do it amicably and peacefully.
But in January, the separatist group Indigenous People of Biafra, or IPOB, launched an armed security unit. Its aim is to push back on Fulani herders, often blamed for clashes in the region. Nigerian authorities consider the unit as subversive and have cracked down on the armed group, sending security forces to states where it is active. The government also banned IPOB's activities, which are led by British-Nigerian activist Nnamdi Kanu. Some Nigerian political analysts say IPOB's demands for independence are unlikely to succeed.
It's legitimate for them to make demands for separation. But the reality on the ground is that it's difficult for Nigeria to separate. We've been together for over a century. We have intermarried significantly. We have migrated extensively.
In recent months, a Yoruba separatist group has appeared, also calling for the creation of an independent state. The so-called Oduduwa Republic would include the southwestern parts of the country, including Nigeria's economic capital, Lagos. Analyst Ibrahim says political marginalization is to blame for the rise in these separatist movements.
A lot of Nigerians are very dissatisfied with the political community we have. They feel it is not structured to serve their interests. They feel there are significant levels of marginalization that makes their citizenship ineffective.
Experts predict agitation by these movements will likely increase as the country heads towards elections in 2023. But they say the Nigerian government is unlikely to cede any power to the separatists, and the conflict will be too dangerous to pursue. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Ethiopia accused the United States on Monday of meddling in its affairs after Washington announced restrictions on economic and security assistance over alleged human rights abuses during the conflict in the northern Tigray region. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Sunday the restrictions were meant to push the parties involved to settle the conflict that erupted in November. Ethiopia's foreign ministry said that if the U.S. restrictions continued, Addis Ababa will be forced to reassess its relations with the United States. Ethiopia has said the conflict in Tigray is an internal matter and that the restrictions are unhelpful, coming ahead of national elections scheduled for June 21st. Several international organizations have joined together and launched a new One Health high-level expert panel to improve understanding of how diseases with the potential to trigger pandemics emerge and spread. The panel will advise the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the World Organization for Animal Health, the United Nations Environment Programme, and the World Health Organization on the development of a long-term global plan of action to avert outbreaks of diseases like H5N1, avian influenza, MERS, Ebola, Zika, and possibly COVID-19. According to the WHO, 3/4 of all emerging infectious diseases originate in animals. The panel will consider the impact of human activity on the environment and wildlife habitats. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus explains the initiative on the One Health expert panel will take some key first steps, including analyzing scientific knowledge about the factors that led to transmission of a disease from animal to human and a human to animal. The international working group is co-chaired by virology experts Professor Wanda Moctar of South Africa and Professor Thomas Martinleider of Germany.
The COVID-19 pandemic is a powerful demonstration that human health does not exist in a vacuum, and nor can our efforts to protect and promote it. The close links between human, animal, and environmental health demand close collaboration, communication, and coordination between the relevant sectors. One Health is not a new concept, but the high-level expert panel is a much-needed initiative to take it to the next level.
So we need that One Health approach, but let's be honest, the weakest link in terms of our attention as a global community, in terms of our research and our investment in the animal-human environmental continuum is environmental health. And together we can fix that. That means ending overexploitation of wildlife and natural resources. That means having a conversation about global dietary patterns. That means farming that is nature positive. This means finance that doesn't destroy nature. And it means investing in the science and the partnerships across disciplines and capacities so that we're able to prepare and prevent the next pandemic.
Uganda hosts Africa's largest population of refugees, and psychologists say the rate of attempted suicides among them has jumped during the COVID-19 pandemic. There have been efforts to help those who fled physical danger only to suffer from deadly mental trauma. From Kampala, Halima Thumani filed this report.
22-year-old Meta Justin from the Democratic Republic of Congo was already living a hard life in one of Uganda's refugee settlements. When the Ugandan government announced measures last year to control the spread of COVID-19, life got even harder. With little or no work available to locals, Meta, who previously survived on casual labor outside the settlement, had no income to supplement the aid his family was given. For Meta, who lived with 5 siblings and a jobless father, it was the hunger that almost got him to take his life.
We slept 2 times without, 2 days without eating food. We're just surviving on just porridge, bit of porridge, which sustained us for the bit of moments. And we really, I really, by then I was like, if it's like this, which means it's useless for me to stay in this world.
Mamoru Jackson, a refugee from South Sudan, says it was the lack of human interaction that pushed him to the wall. Having fled to Uganda with a younger brother, leaving his parents in South Sudan, Mamoru wasn't ready to assume the role of a parent.
Actually, that thought came into my mind. Why? Because I feel like I'm alone in this world. And also the work at the home, because I was the only elder person, the other brother of mine is still very young. I feel overwhelmed.
Malay Ali, a psychologist and counselor, says both Justin's and Jackson's conditions were deepened due to the thought of not being cared for after separation from family. He outlines the underlying issues.
Parental abuse, poverty, those who have been stricken, then those who are traumatized, especially those who faced violence, exchange of bullets, now like for the refugee dwellers, that they really had a lot of post-traumatic stress that was now facing them, transitioning them to another stage of contemplating suicide.
Psychologists say the contemplation of suicide takes place in stages. These include losing hope, planning on how to end their lives by either using an overdose, poison, ropes, or falling from high elevations, and finally accomplishing the act. It is at the second stage that psychologists say people at risk must get the attention they need to prevent them going through with suicide.
Illnesses, for example, like depression, in African cultures are not recognized as mental illnesses. So I think there's a need for people to understand that. I mean, if you see a relative, for example, talking of suicide, don't take it lightly. I mean, the person probably is already entertaining those ideas.
Some signs psychiatrists say one should look out for are withdrawal, crying, self-isolation, loss of interest in formerly pleasurable activities, and lack of sleep. Halima Athmani for VOA News, Kampala, Uganda.
Would like to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. Our address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, how demand for donkey skins in China is threatening to decimate the working animals in African countries. We'll be right back.
All this week on Africa 54, we are partnering with the BAL to bring you the best of African basketball. Don't miss it.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Spain, one of the early epicenters of the COVID-19 pandemic, has been rushing to get its population vaccinated. 33% now have received at least a first dose, but aid agencies and advocates estimate many of the country's 1 million undocumented migrants are not getting vaccinated because of fear. Jonathan Spear narrates this report from Alfonso Beato in Barcelona.
Spain is among the few European nations whose national vaccination program aims to reach everyone in its territory, including immigrants whose status is classified as irregular.
Spain and Holland are the only countries that explicitly mention irregular migrants in their national vaccination strategies.
On paper, it looks good, but migrant advocates question whether Spain can implement that strategy. As in the US and some other countries, Spain's rollout is not managed centrally. Each region implements its own policy, and enforcement of the general directives from Madrid can vary. So inequalities in the regions can occur, say some analysts, depending on whether local leaders see outreach to migrant populations as a priority.
Mediation and cultural translation are tools that could enable access by these immigrant groups.
Spanish-speaking immigrants from Latin America have an easier time answering questions and accessing vaccines. But for those who do not speak Spanish, access is more complicated. A big problem is immigration status, as in the case of Guinean Musa Sao, who has applied for asylum in Spain.
They sent me away saying denied, denied. But now I'm here waiting to see what day I'm going to have papers. If you do not have papers, you cannot do anything.
Like many young African migrants here, Sao knows that he needs to learn how to speak Spanish well. But before that happens, he wants a shot.
Yes, I want to get vaccinated because of this disease. One must get immunized in order not to catch the coronavirus.
Many of those undocumented say they don't want to register to be vaccinated because they fear being deported.
Yes, I want to get vaccinated because of this disease. One must get immunized in order not to catch the coronavirus.
The Spanish government has made the Johnson & Johnson vaccine available to groups of non-regularized immigrants without a fixed address. This will make it easier to vaccinate more of the undocumented since it is a single dose. For Alfonso Beato in Barcelona.
Kenya's population of donkeys is once again under threat after the High Court lifted a 2020 ban on donkey slaughterhouses, allowing them to resume selling the meat and skins to Asian markets. The high price for donkey skins for use in Chinese medicine has led to donkey poaching and fears the working animals could soon go extinct. Brenda Mulinya reports from Nairobi.
For years, women like Helena Simeon have relied on the working donkeys to ease the burden of labor in their homes and in their farms.
As women, we get our earnings from our donkeys. We use them to help us in our work. We fetch water with them. We carry luggage. We fetch fodder for our cows, and sometimes we sell them to earn money to educate our children.
This reliable source of labor is now under threat once again. In early March, Kenya's High Court lifted a ban on the slaughter of donkeys for both meat and hide for medicine in the Asian market. Now Kilena is staring at an uncertain future for her and her family. The lifting of the ban is already causing ripple effects in the communities that rely on the animals for labor.
We don't like the donkey abattoirs being reopened. We would like them to be closed permanently because the last 2 weeks alone, donkey theft has increased. We are suffering.
Donkey slaughter was legalized in Kenya in 2012, leading to a rapid decimation of the animal's population and cross-border theft of the same.
There were very many issues that were coming up of donkey thefts, of slaughter of underage donkeys, of cross-border even smuggling of donkeys. But most importantly, communities were losing their livelihoods because the abattoirs were slaughtering very many donkeys a day, much more than naturally the donkeys can replenish.
The Kenya National Bureau of Statistics said in 2019 that the country's donkey population had decreased over the previous 10 years from 1.8 million donkeys in 2009 to just 1.17 million in 2019. This figure is now expected to decline even further with the lifting of the ban to slaughter the most significant and profitable domestic animals in Kenya.
These slaughterhouses were slaughtering about 200 donkeys a day, sometimes 250, but they have an installed capacity of at least 1,000. So if you look at even our current population, if they continue slaughtering at that rate, which is too high, it will be a few short years before the population of donkeys in Kenya gets almost decimated.
Kenya has 4 donkey abattoirs spread across 4 counties. The 4 haven't resumed operations yet as they are waiting to get approved by the licensing authorities. When that happens, activists say the animals will resume their downward slide, presenting a real problem for rural women of the country and the region. Brenda Mulinya for VOA News, Nairobi.
Tuesday, May 25th, marks 1 year since a white police officer in Minneapolis killed George Floyd, a black man. The resulting widespread U.S. protests against police brutality and systematic racism have had reverberations across industries and U.S. government. VOA correspondent Maria Madiallo has our report.
After George Floyd was killed last year in police custody, protests exploded in America's streets. Reaction also extended to corporate boardrooms. To show solidarity, some of America's biggest companies donated millions to support racial justice causes. Justin Hansford teaches law at Howard University in Washington, where he also heads the Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Center.
I did see there being a rush of real financial contributions coming from corporate America, moving to HBCUs, contributions to social justice organizations, Black Lives Matter. They raised tens of millions of dollars, much more than they've raised in the past 7 years.
In sports, the Commissioner of American Professional Football apologized to players for not listening to their concerns about racism sooner, committing $250 million to tackle the issue over the next decade.
The murder of George Floyd is tragic, painful, and unacceptable.
Big box retailer Walmart pledged to donate $100 million over 5 years to fight systemic racism. Soft drink conglomerate PepsiCo, meanwhile, retired the 132-year-old Aunt Jemima pancake mix and syrup brand, whose logo featured an image of a black woman. The U.S. company said it recognized the character's origins were based on a racial stereotype. It also committed to a 5-year, $400 million initiative to lift up black communities. Despite such actions, America still has healing to do, according to Robert Sanders of the Henry C. Lee College of Criminal Justice and Forensic Sciences at the University of New Haven.
One of the things that is tough for the African-American community and those who empathize with us is there hasn't been any time to heal. So from one monstrous event as you begin the stages of grief and healing and all of those things, we roll right into another one.
The conviction last month of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin was a watershed moment, according to Hans Ford.
Many of us have gone generations without ever expecting to see a police officer convicted for killing a black man. I was thinking about the Rodney King trial, the Trayvon Martin trial. I expected the same outcome. The different outcome to me has a lot to do with the fact that the protests raised awareness in the minds of the jury to the point where they were more knowledgeable about the realities of whether or not a police officer is 100% right 100% of the time.
There must be a reckoning for other police officers who were present when Floyd died, Sanders says.
There are 3 other perpetrators who, in some ways, you could look at their illegal activity as even more horrifying, as aiding, abetting the murder that they saw in front of their own eyes as their fellow citizens pleaded for them to get engaged and to stop it.
Those officers are awaiting trial. Meanwhile, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland recently opened sweeping probes of police departments in 2 U.S. cities, including the one where Floyd died.
They're looking at the facts of what's going on in our nation and in our policing, and I'm hopeful that going into and launching a civil probe of policing in Minneapolis and a civil probe of policing in Metro Louisville, where Breonna Taylor was killed, is a start. They're not solutions, but they're a start on the path toward finding a solution, at least in the justice system.
Democrats in the House of Representatives passed the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. The bill would limit the qualified immunity police officers have against civil suits and create a national registry of police misconduct. The legislation faces hurdles in the Senate, where Republican Tim Scott has introduced his own police reform bill and is in negotiations with Democrats in the evenly divided chamber. Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Washington.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.
Next on Straight Talk Africa, we'll take an in-depth look at the youth-led social uprisings we've seen across Africa in recent years. As young people take to the streets and social media to demand change, we ask, have they been effective? And what have the mass uprisings really accomplished? Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.